So, it is Friday, 11/11, and, okay, so I'm walking my dog, which I always do. It's really nice out because the sun has set for the most part, and so it's nice. I don't like exercising in the full blaze of the sun. If I'm swimming, I'm more inclined to do it, but I am very paranoid about skin cancer. So, yeah, I try to, I don't know, I guess there are things that are preventable, and so if something's in my control, I'm going to prevent it, whatever it is, and that's preventable. So that's why, yeah, that's how that works. And so I'm with my dog. My dog's chilling. She's a badass. And I don't feel like I've ever been super involved in politics until this election. I mean, I feel like I've always cared about certain issues. Like, I don't want people to harm the environment. I prefer when people don't eat animals. I'm not a huge fan of industrial farming because of how animals are treated. Like, for example, palm oil. It sounds so specific, but I'm very careful to check the ingredients of things that I'm eating, because when I was in college, there was this Greenpeace advocate who I was speaking to, and then I learned about this issue, and then it became a huge thing because I never knew this before. But a lot of pastries or desserts that we eat that are like pre-made, that you buy in the store, are made using palm oil. And I don't know what's special about palm oil, aside from what I'm going to bring up, which is to harvest palm oil. Companies like Hershey's have destroyed an entire forest in Indonesia, an entire rainforest, which has a lot of impact in terms of environmentally, in terms of taking away homes from different species. But I guess it's also the sort of thing where they weren't actually allowed to do it, they kind of just did it. And I don't know, I guess that kind of bothers me, because in our world I feel that, examples show this. A lot of different examples show this. Where if you have enough money, that affords you a certain immunity to treating other people or the environment or animals with respect. Species die out when you take away their environment where they live. And, that happens in the Indonesian rainforest when people want to harvest palm oil and they have to cut down all of these trees. All of these orangutans have nowhere to go. I recognize that it's easy for I got dust on I brought my GoPro to see if I wanted to record on it, and then I recorded a little bit on it, and I don't know, I have a GoPro because I like recording, like action videos sort of things. Like when I play sports, I like recording on my GoPro. But I think when I'm just recording my little podcast episodes, I'm going to just do audio only, because I don't really feel the need for the video. You can stare at me, but the point isn't to stare at me, the point is to communicate ideas. And, yeah. I may change my mind on that, but for now, that's my thoughts on that. I guess it's the sort of thing where I was pretty happy with Obama being president. I can't speak too much about specific issues or policies. I think it was more so that I had a general sort of trust in him. I trusted him to be the leader of my country, and I don't have that level of trust in Trump right now. If you were to ask me if I were to do business with him or that sort of thing, it's different. But in terms of politics, it's really, really difficult for me to trust him. And I think it's really difficult for me to trust Trump as the president of the United States, is because I don't see the motives as being altruistic, and I think that's a huge issue. I don't want to be cynical, but I'm speaking to his history. And it's not that I'm pulling this out of my ass, but it's the sort of thing where I don't see his choice of being a leader of the free world as something that he did because he really wants to help people. There was a reason why I was very vocal about showing my support for Bernie Sanders, and that's largely because I felt that it was really altruistic in terms of he wanted to provide a better standard of living for more people in the United States of America, in terms of wanting to advocate for somewhat socialistic policies that you see in Europe, but that I personally advocate for, even though it's not common in America, things like universal health care, things like free college education, that sort of thing. It's a lot more common in Europe than it is in America, from what I understand, which is a huge reason why there's a bit of a disillusionment with how America works sometimes for me. And with regards to Trump, there's a level in which I think that perhaps his interest in American politics is a way for him to have more direct control over the markets. I guess that's just the theory that I have on that. I can't really expand more on it. It's more so just because he is very vocal about his position on a lot of things. Just looking at the markets, whether it's bonds or commodities or the Treasury, they're very, very reactive with regards to who is our president. It's very reactive, because whoever is the president, that really affects what sort of people they choose to work with, what sorts of ideas they're willing to tolerate, what sorts of ideas they're willing to listen, what sorts of ideas they're willing to push forward, and that ultimately affects what sorts of policies and bills and laws that come into play or are perhaps reinterpreted under a person's presidential term. And I'm not entirely worried, perhaps. I feel like Trump becoming president is a good catalyst in a way to kind of mobilize people to care. Because I feel like with, other presidential candidates, me personally, because I wasn't old enough at the time, I wasn't very involved and I didn't care very much. I was like, okay, whatever. Okay, cool, sure, yeah, okay. But with this presidential election, I've had much more of a desire to speak about it. And something that I've recognized is that because Trump is very open about his views and he makes very dramatic and concrete and straight to the point statements, whereas a lot of politicians tend to be a bit more diplomatic and level about the opinions they're willing to express. Because Trump is the way that he is, it's really, really polarized the American populace. I shouldn't say that in a general sense, because from my own experience within the people that I interact with, I would say that it's become a very polarized experience, where people are becoming very, very vocal, and I'm seeing a lot of news reports of people on both sides reacting very, very strongly. On the one hand, I think Trump is a great troll in regards to how the internet uses that term, in terms of someone who's trying to emotionally fuck with you. And I think he's done a good job of that in terms of he's very good at getting a reaction from people. And I don't know, I guess I'm curious to see what happens. I guess he says dramatic things like, I'm going to build a wall with Mexico. But, I never really believed him when he said that. I kind of interpreted that as, when there's some general in a war, you say dramatic things that people are secretly thinking because it makes them feel better, even though there's not really any sort of realistic, logical basis for it. A lot of Americans are scared of losing jobs. A lot of Americans are scared of jobs and employment being outsourced to other countries. That's a huge fear a lot of Americans have. And I think that the reason why Trump has been successful in the way that he has is because he's eaten into the insecurities of Americans. People respond emotionally not because they aren't reasonable people, but when they're scared. Fear is a really, really good emotion to work with in terms of it's a really powerful emotion. Love is a really powerful emotion too, but I think that in this sort of situation in terms of politics, it's a lot harder to work with that kind of emotion because of the context. Whereas with something like fear, everyone is always scared about losing their sense of security. Whether it's losing a family member, losing a job, or just something happening in their life that's going to disrupt how they live their life. That's how it is. That's normal. It's not just a human innate nature. It's innate to any living thing. It's programmed in our DNA to seek out actions or behaviors that will promote not only our own personal long-term survival, but promote it long enough so that we could reproduce, and so that we can have kids, and so that those kids can survive. And I think the reason Trump has been so successful in his campaign and in winning is because I think he understands human nature in a way that Hillary doesn't. I'm not saying that Hillary is stupid or that Trump is smart, or I'm not making any sort of claims as to their intelligence levels. But I think that Trump was effective in empowering a very specific group within the American populace, as was Bernie Sanders. But I think the group of people that Bernie Sanders was really good at empowering was a very small group of the American population versus Trump. The people that Bernie Sanders was very effective and is very effective at empowering are people similar to myself, and myself included. Millennial type of people, young adult type of people, very liberal type of people. A lot of my friends and acquaintances did support Bernie Sanders until that no longer became an option with regards to the presidential election. And I read this article yesterday about what went wrong with the more liberal party. Because when you look at the history of American politics and American political parties, liberalism in America today is different than liberalism in America in the past. Liberalism in America in the past, more closely towards its origin, was something that was formed as a reactionary movement to different companies, different organizations treating their workers unfairly. And so a lot of the people that you would see in these liberal political groups would be workers, just normal people. People who would be in labor unions, people who worked for the railroads, who worked for different trades, that sort of thing. And the Liberal Party in the past represented and was stronger than other parties in America because most people in America are just, they work a regular job. They aren't the wealthiest people in the world. The reason why Trump was effective in this campaign, whereas I think the liberals weren't, was that he was effective in creating solidarity. He was effective in creating a community. Even if it was grounded in something a bit unsavory and a bit unethical, that's why he was effective, in my opinion, was because he could create that sense of solidarity. In the past, the Liberal Democratic Party was effective because they created a sense of solidarity. But that's changed in recent years, and I could personally relate to that, because as I was reading this article yesterday, I'll find that article and I'll link it into this video. I'll find that article. As I was reading that article yesterday, I talked about how liberalism had changed from this thing that represented the interests of the common person, of the average person, to being this movement that could only be understood by a certain select privileged group of America, the liberal elites of today. Liberalism had transformed from its origins as this of the people, of the common worker, of the labor movement, to something that was, how should I phrase this? In its origins, liberalism stood for the common man, for the common person. I'm using the word man because when the Liberal Party formed, women didn't work. That wasn't a thing. But you understand what I'm saying. How I use man in this context just refers to person in a general sense. But anyway, in its origin, liberalism was popular and effective in creating solidarity and creating a sense of community because it was inclusive. It included everyone. It tried to advocate for the rights of the greatest good. That's key. Liberalism in its past, in its origin, was really effective because it was inclusive, it created a sense of community, and it advocated for the greatest amount of good. Creating good for not just 1% of the population, not just 2% of the population, not just 20% of the population, but for as many people as it could. That's really significant. Because liberalism of today, it doesn't have that same sense of inclusivity. It doesn't have that same sense of community. It doesn't have that same sort of image, that same sort of perception. Liberalism today is often used alongside the term liberal elite. And the reason why it's often become called the liberal elite is because there's a level of snobbery or exclusion that the liberal elites have come to be associated with in terms of, oh, you're not a liberal unless you've been educated enough. Oh, you're not a liberal unless you understand this. You're not a liberal because blah, blah, and all of these sorts of things. There's a sense of, we're better than you. You're not us because we're better than you. And there's that sort of image that liberalism has today in America. And I think Trump was effective where Clinton wasn't, because I think that Trump was really good at creating a sense of solidarity in enough of the population, whereas there wasn't enough solidarity in the rest of the population. Trump understood his target audience, and he empowered them together. Whereas everyone else who he didn't empower became very disenfranchised. They just became like lone wolves trying to figure out what to do. Some voted for Hillary, some voted for one of the third party candidates. And because there wasn't enough solidarity, there wasn't enough movement to create any sort of action in favorable terms. Favorable terms being not electing Trump. I am biased in this. I recognize that. I have no sort of... I would have preferred Hillary over Trump. That isn't to say that whoever is a political leader, I can't really do anything about it. I accept it, but I guess the point or the purpose of this episode is to clarify why I think this election went down the way this election went down. And so the effective thesis or the effective assertion that I'm putting forth is that this election went down the way this election went down because Trump knew his audience and he empowered his specific audience. You don't need to empower everyone. You just need to empower the people that will relate to and support your message. Trump knew that. As obnoxious as people think that he is, it didn't matter. Because as long as his supporters appreciated him, that was enough. And I think the issue that Hillary went through was that she didn't really do that. A lot of her audience, although they supported her, they didn't really support her. They supported her because she represented the party. She represented a more liberal America. But they represented the ideas, but not her in herself. And because I think that there was a disconnect between her and her target audience, that she wasn't able to effectively rally and create a sense of empowerment and solidarity in people that Trump was much more effective in doing. So this is my personal analysis of what went down with regards to the 2016 presidential election in the U.S. I'm sure a lot of other factors come into play, but this was a very specific element that I wanted to discuss because I see this element coming into play with regards to the people that I interact with, the people that I know, the people that I talk to. This sort of issue I recognize. As I've said at the beginning of this, I supported Bernie, although I voted for Hillary. And a lot of my friends, same thing. They supported Bernie, but they didn't support either Hillary or Trump. With a lot of the Republican voters that I'm aware of, I think it was a bit, I don't know, I'm going to leave it at that. But, yeah, so I guess I'm curious if you agree with me. Okay. I'm still walking my dog, but I'm going to sign off. I don't need you to agree with me, but I guess these episodes, these podcasts are helpful to me in terms of communicating and clarifying how I see the world, or how I frame the world. And I don't expect everyone to see the world or frame the world just as I do, but I guess it's interesting to hear how people frame the world. So I guess there's a hope in my mind that there's, Poe, what are you doing? Come on. So I guess in my mind there's a hope that people appreciate hearing my frame of mind as much as I appreciate hearing other people's frame of mind, whether or not we agree with each other. Okay, good night.